Hello, gorgeous peeps. Andreou here with a service announcement. We finally managed to carve out some time with our friend Ayesha Hazarika in the studio, and we sort of forgot ourselves and were in there for almost 2 hours putting the world to rights. It was such a gorgeous, relaxed and insightful chat that, rather than take to it with a cleaver in the editing suite, denying you this lovely content, and seeing as this is a long weekend, we are putting it out in 2 parts. Today on the absolute Trump fiasco over in Iran, the silver lining of the UK moving closer to Europe, and what Labour can do to prepare the country for the hard times ahead. In the second part, out tomorrow, we will talk about Ayesha's very frank impressions of her first couple of years in the House of Lords, ideas for reforming our second chamber, as well as disinformation and the state of our media. Enjoy. Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast that attempts to balance resurrection with insurrection. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith. Happy Easter, everybody. We are here to fill your basket with excellent analysis so you can be a happy bunny rather than hopping mad.
All while giving you actions to take that will turn impotent fury into practical salvation.
So find a comfy spot, crack open that chocolate, and help us begin another Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi.
Now, before we get into today's show proper, a huge thank you to everyone who joined our Ask Us Anything session at the weekend. It was wonderful to see so many of our gorgeous backers on screen, and what a thrilling grilling you gave us.
Such was the turnout and volume of brilliant questions that at the end we ran out of time and our Zoom cut off just as we were about to answer a question from Sarah, joining us all the way from Paris. Sorry, Sarah, it was genuinely an excellent question and we have decided to answer it on today's show a bit later, so stay tuned for that.
Now, if you want to join Sarah and all our other brilliant patrons for our next regular online live session, get yourself over to ko-fi.com/quietriotpod and become a monthly supporter for as little as $5 a month.
Now, we really should get on with today's show.
Yeah, so this week, as the ill-advised war with Iran that Trump apparently won on day 1 enters month 2, the consequences, economic and political, international and domestic, continue to expand.
And we're going to draw back the velvet curtain on the upper chamber to talk about what life is really like for peers in the House of Lords.
To help us with all that, words cannot express with finesse the largesse, I confess, at the sheer noblesse of today's Baroness. It's Ayesha Hazarika. Welcome, Ayesha.
Hello. What an intro. I want an intro like that everywhere I go.
I think that's
You
fair.
just have to follow me around and intro me everywhere.
Like one of those, Maître d'Hôtel.
And a bugle beforehand.
Yes, a herald.
Ayesha, we had fellow Scot, Annalisa Dodds, on a couple of weeks ago, and we asked her about Aberdonian Ruiz and Butteries. I think I've said that correctly, probably haven't.
She said Rowies, actually.
Rowies, she did correct us.
Even different.
So it is only right that we ask you about Scottish fare too. So when you go home, when you're visiting family, like which snack do you so miss that when you arrive you devour it, or you stock up and bring it back in your suitcase?
Well, the thing that I miss so much when I'm away from home, and as soon as I get home, I'm like a sort of slavering dog in terms of wanting to... It's the most un-Scottish thing. It's my mum's homemade chicken curry.
Amazing.
I'm sorry.
Right.
I'm sure
it
it's
is
excellent.
just the best. It is just the best. It is unmatched.
You tried to replicate it and you can't.
Well, I'm not a terribly good cook,
Okay.
as your friend Nigel, the divine Nigella Lawson will attest to. I'm not the greatest cook, but honestly, it's just, it cannot be matched. I've been to some of the finest Indian restaurants around, but your mum's food is always the best. So there's that. Then apart from that, I am very partial to one of Lanarkshire's finest, which is any product by Tunnocks.
Oh.
Particularly a tea cake.
Oh,
I love all
can't
that
beat it.
fluffy white mallow stuff in the middle.
I do like a mallow.
And I like deconstructing and I eat the bottom bit first and then scoop out the mallow. It's quite a process. I love that. And also my other thing that I love is on a rather winey night out and a wine-fueled night out in Glasgow city centre, it cannot be beaten getting chips from this fish and chips in this amazing place called the Blue Lagoon, which is a toll institution.
I know it.
Right by Central Station.
Someone took me there when I first visited because they said you have to.
It wasn't victim of the vape
It
shop
was,
fire.
sadly.
Oh, no.
It was. I mean, it is a chain, and hopefully they'll rebuild it. But the one just by Central Station was iconic because it was you'd have your night, you'd totter along to the Blue Lagoon. It was like a party in the Blue Lagoon. It was like the after party.
Yeah.
You'd have your chips and get the train home.
Straight up chips, curry sauce, gravy, cheesy
I just
chip.
like a normal. I just like
Salt,
normal.
vinegar.
Actually, just salt.
Really?
I don't
Okay.
like anything getting soggy. Like
Right.
I don't like crispy things getting soggy. So I like, and of course I do like a bit of fish, a good bit of battered fish, and sometimes a battered sausage.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, as a rule, I think I'm in your camp. Like, I don't like people who squeeze lemon over, a schnitzel or something like that. Something that you've worked hard to make.
Or like rocket in a
crispy.
panini that goes all slimy and gross. Like, no.
You don't, but chips are the exception for me. And when people ask me how much vinegar is enough, basically it has to be enough to make you just involuntarily cough when you first open the bag. You have to do a sort of...
It literally, like, your eyes start watering. You're like, it's like napalm. You're like, The other great thing that they do around there is, I think, actually the night before the Scottish referendum, had what's known as a pizza crunch, deep fried pizza.
Whoa.
Oh,
Let's just cancel the rest of the show.
I'm so hungry now.
Talk about. Can you start a campaign to get Greggs to start doing macaroni cheese pies down south? Because they only do them up north, and I think that's really unfair.
I think Times Radio have got to get behind this campaign.
well, the only thing I'll push back on that is I feel like the north-south divide only favours the south, so maybe it's good that the north has something on us. Maybe this is rebalancing the scales of iniquity.
Riot. Quite aside from the havoc being wreaked on millions of people in Iran, Lebanon, and throughout the Middle East, the ripples from Donald Trump's reckless flip-flopping on Iran continue to expand and engulf the politics and economics to varying extents of the entire world, both at international and domestic levels. As we record on Wednesday afternoon, to recap just this week, on Sunday, the US president said he would attack Iran's power plants and desalination plants. On Monday, he said great progress had been made and a deal was within reach. On Tuesday, piqued by Spain's decision to close its airspace to US activity related to this war, Trump said Hormuz is not his problem and he might just walk away from it and leave NATO altogether. On Wednesday, Secretary of War and Keggers, Pete Hegseth, suggested the US might put troops on the ground and the US is in it for the long haul. An hour later, Trump said that a deal was irrelevant and the US would leave in 2 to 3 weeks after bombing Iran into the Stone Ages. Kemi Badenoch, along with most Euro-MAGA leg humpers, fully supports the US's stance on Iran, despite it being the opposite to the one an hour ago, which she also fully supported. Markets, meanwhile, are up and down faster than a bungee-jumping stripper's knickers. Petrol stations have replaced per-gallon prices with "Inquire Within" signs. NASA's first crewed mission for decades to the moon will stay there because they could only fill half the tank. And Keir Starmer has popped up to make a speech that is basically an expanded version of a tea towel that says, "Keep calm and carry on," only less animated.
I do have to level with people on this. This will not be easy. But I emphasise, again, it's clear to me that the main determinant now of the impact is going to be how long the conflict goes on and the question of how quickly we can get safe passage through the Strait of Hormuz. And the two don't necessarily go together. In other words, I don't think it can necessarily be assumed that a de-escalation of the conflict necessarily at the same time brings the full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. And that's why we're moving to the next level of planning in relation to the Strait of Hormuz. We've been dealing with this for some time, but now we move to the next stage with the Foreign Secretary meeting coming up later this week, the first time we've convened that coalition, if you like, of countries to look at diplomatic means, political means, and then the military planners coming together at a separate meeting to look at capabilities.
Naomi, I'm being a little bit unkind, but actually isn't keep calm and carry on the right stance right now?
Look, you're not being unkind. You are being accurate. The last thing we want at the moment is panic. Okay, That's not going to help anything or anyone. And keep calm and carry on, of course, was originally this piece of wartime propaganda to stop everyone from panicking. Markets definitely don't need any more volatility right now. Our European alliances don't need any more chaos. And the public doesn't need a PM adding to the noise. So the instinct, I think, is correct. The problem is that Starmer seems to have confused calm with invisible. There's a version of this where a leader stands up and says, here's what's happening, here's what we think, here's what we're going to do about it, that is reassuring. And instead, I kind of feel like we're getting the political equivalent of a shrug in a suit, like calm without clarity, rather than, actual leadership. And I don't know why the government aren't doing far more to lay the blame on Trump very, very overtly. Why do I say that? The pain isn't being felt now. But now is when everyone knows about what's happening in Iran, in the Strait of Hormuz, with the Houthis. That is dominating newspapers, news, bulletins. Even if you only listen to, drive time radio shows, you're still going to be getting that puncturing into your eardrums of what's going on. The pain will come in 3 months. The pain will come in 4 or 5 months. We've had the Food and Drink Federation out today before we recorded saying food inflation could go to 10%. Okay, it's not going to happen in your weekly shop this week. It's probably not going to happen in your weekly shop in a couple of weeks' time. But it'll be when potentially the news has moved on from the acute crisis in Iran. And then it's going to be much harder to blame what Trump has done than it would be now. So I think government should be out right now really communicating who is at fault here, who is to blame, how badly it's been handled, how much it is going to affect British people. And then, of course, they can talk about the other good stuff, which he did do, and we're going to come on to in a bit. And this, again, is yet another reason why we need to hug our European neighbours much more closely.
But Ayesha, isn't the problem with that at the moment you kind of don't know the exact impact and effect, because this might last another week or another 2 months, and what that means in terms of prices, etc., are vastly different.
No, completely. And I have to say, I can't remember a time of greater anxiety and sort of blind anxiety, and that feeling of collective helplessness. And people are so frightened, because Naomi is absolutely right. This is not just something happening in a faraway country that you can be like, oh, it's one group of people fighting another group of people. It's ideology. It's this, that, next thing. We know that this is going to be at our front doors very, very, very soon. Everybody is now cognizant of this. I had a conversation with somebody 2 days ago, and they made this incredible point, which was this war, however long it goes on for, whether it, as you say, 2 years, 2 weeks, Iraq was horrific for so many reasons. In a way, this could be more consequential than even Iraq because of the profound effect that it has on citizens across the world on an economic level. This could catalyze a huge economic catastrophe, right? And which could have huge, far-reaching consequences for society, for individuals, for families, for politics as we know it. I think this is huge. And it feels like we are all on this kind of jumbo jet.
And the pilot is nuts.
And exactly, it feels like someone has gone into the cockpit and, a nutter has gone into the cockpit and taken it over. And we are now at the mercy of this person. But what I do agree with Naomi on is I do think that, look, I think it's really difficult for Keir Starmer. And I think he has handled this the best he can. I think it's so difficult. I think that all the people who right at the beginning were like, just support Donald Trump and give him a blank check for whatever he wants to do. I mean, are you kidding me? And I think I think the government is doing a lot to kind of remind the Tories of that. But they have to keep prosecuting the fact that this was not their war, because you're right, Naomi. I do know, and I think this is going to really hurt when it gets cold again.
Yeah.
When our heating bills rocket up and the price of food, and people are thinking ahead to Christmas and they're absolutely panicking. And at that point...
Well, they can't drive to work.
Yeah.
They can't take the children to school. Most people, according to YouGov's latest poll, are expecting fuel shortages to happen. Now, I'm old enough to remember when they happened in 2000 under Blair because of haulier strikes. And I was just about to take my driving test, and my instructor, bless him, left just enough in the tank for me to be able to drive to the centre, do my thing. And I remember how bad that was. That was obviously only going to be a short, sharp thing because it was linked to a strike. It was not an exogenous factor like this is. And people are saying I don't know if my plane will be able to take off because we don't know if there'll be enough jet fuel by the time my holiday comes around. Now, that is the first world problem. And Ayesha's dead right. When that heating needs to be turned back on in earnest in the winter, that is going to be some extreme pain.
And
for
I
a
think
lot
that
of
is the
people.
moment as well. I mean, when people remortgage, I mean, I'm actually in the process of remortgaging, so it's horrific. It's absolutely horrific.
Yeah, it's a shit show.
But it's what's so important for the government is that people will understandably want to blame them. And in this case, it is not their fault. This is forces bigger than them. Personally, I think this would have been the week, and I think I'm in a minority on this, but I think the damage that Donald Trump is causing to our country is going to be so huge. The way he's trash-talking us on a consistent basis, I think this would have been the week to actually postpone the royal visit, not announce the royal visit.
I mean, my sense is that these things happen. They have happened before. They cause a crisis. They come, they go. But I think what's making people super anxious right now is the fact that there seems no rhyme or reason to this. And so it's not just the insecurity about this thing going on. There is also a kind of what next?
Yeah.
Because everyone understands that we are in a plane and the pilot has gone completely nuts. And there's very little you can do. And that powerlessness translates into anxiety.
And I think it also comes on top of 10 years of feeling, actually more than 10 years, right? Actually coming up to sort of 20, global financial crisis, austerity, Brexit, And I think for so many people, there is this feeling of just being burnt out, exhausted. And when am I going to catch a break? Are we? Is this just the way it is now? And I think that is so difficult for people psychologically. And it's making mainstream politics look really boring, really impotent, and it's making the extremes look a lot more seductive.
I mean, the only thing I will say is that because Labour has been held to account in such a sort of overwhelmingly vicious way, in my view, for anything they have had to change, it makes sense for them not to promise something that is going to be about next winter's fuel, because then even if the situation suddenly resolves itself and actually it's not as bad as we think, they can't take it back. They'll have to pay that or make that allowance because otherwise they will be crucified because it will be seen as taking something away. So I think they're being so guarded to see what it is precisely they need to give and to whom to support them through what's coming, and which is not clear at the moment.
Quiet Riot. Starting or growing your own business can be intimidating and lonely at times. Your to-do list may feel endless with new tasks, and lists can easily begin to overrun your life. So finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything as a built-in business partner can be a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US. From household names like Gymshark, Rare Beauty, and Heinz, to brands just getting started. Shopify has hundreds of ready-to-use templates that can help you build a beautiful online store that matches your brand's style. And you can tackle all the important tasks in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics and more. No need to save multiple websites or try to figure out what platform is hosting the tool that you need. And if people haven't heard about your brand, you can get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you, with easy-to-run email and social media campaigns to reach customers wherever they're scrolling or strolling. Start your business today with the industry's best business partner, Shopify, and start hearing. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/realm. Go to shopify.com/realm. That's shopify.com/realm.
Quiet, Riot. One of, I guess, the silver linings of this is that Starmer has been made to lean into the urgency of getting closer to Europe, especially in defense matters. I mean, for a man who said again and again last year that he would not be forced to choose between allies, he has been forced to choose between allies.
I mean, categorically. You're right. Like, there was never really a forced choice. You know, there was a wishful thinking, diplomatic or otherwise, that the UK could maintain its post-Brexit coziness with Washington while simultaneously rebuilding ties with Brussels. Brussels was always going to be deeply sceptical about that, concerned about what that would mean about the integrity of the single market, American goods of a much lower quality, with a very, very different set of regulatory requirements making its way into Europe. And it was a nice idea that lasted roughly until Trump started behaving like Trump. And now we've just got this acceleration of something that was probably always inevitable, that Britain genuinely committed to rules-based international order, to NATO, to trade stability, simply has more in common structurally and emotionally and historically and geographically with Europe than a White House that is frankly treating its alliances as leverage. I don't think that Starmer wanted to arrive at this conclusion this quickly and this publicly, but here we are. And I think the interesting question now is how receptive Europe are going to be to that. And what they tell me is that everything has got to be baked in economic resilience, because they are going through what we are going through because of all of this. And anything that will help the economic resilience of the member states, and we can demonstrate that in terms of this closer alignment, this closer relationship, will be something that I think they'll be prepared to hear.
Aisha, the US's position at the moment kind of vacillates on a daily basis between we don't need any allies and why won't our allies help us?
Yeah, it's kind of like, I didn't even want to go out with you. You're really ugly. Why won't you go out with me?
I dump you. Which is it, do you think? Is there a sense that maybe Europe has called his bluff and actually turns out to have been a bit more important than he anticipated?
I think there's two things going on. I genuinely think that the beating heart of the MAGA project, which is essentially, and if you look at who might succeed Donald Trump as well, and who are the big players around him, who's he listening to, who's in his gang? It's obviously him, the voices in his head, Pete Hegseth and J.D. Vance, right? They seem to be the kind of people around him. One thing which I think is absolutely clear from all of them is that they are really anti-European. They have a quite a virulent disdain of what they think Europe is now. I think they have in their head that Europe is kind of Viennese society from the 18th century, right? That's what they think. They don't like what Europe is now in terms of modern and vibrant and all of that kind of thing.
Which is interesting because they seem to want for America a sort of repeat of the Gilded Age, which was a mimicry of precisely that kind of European society as the Americans saw it.
I think they fetishize that sort of image of their head, that very elegant, affluent kind of era. So I think there is a genuine, we just don't like, we don't like what Europe stands for. We don't like the feel of it, the taste. We just push back it. We hate it on a cultural, not even on an economic level, on a cultural, fundamental cultural level. I think Britain is slightly different. I think they like Britain as a trinket because of the history and, of course, we're intertwined and the royal family. So I think Britain is something which you're right, they kind of vacillate between, but I think they want us to be around them if we are very much like the lapdog and we are very much, we still
51st
love
day.
you,
Yeah.
and you're our new king, sort of thing. That's, I think, how they see us. But I just think that they have got no respect for Europe, and they have diminishing respect for us as a country. And I keep hearing people ringing up radio shows and things like that, going sort of almost like victim blaming Britain and Europe for this situation that we find ourselves in. And I heard somebody on a show today, and they were like, well, we brought this on ourselves because like we've never done anything for I'm like, Bassett Law, go to Bassett Law and speak to the people of Bassett Law when they saw body bags coming back in terms of servicemen and women who put their lives in the line, they put their families' lives in the line for America, right?
Yeah. And I mean, as I've said so many times, it's also ahistorical. America got to make the dollar the world's reserve currency in exchange for basically looking after Europe, which is a massive, massive advantage. And the other thing I've been saying all along is onward basis. America has massive interest in the Middle East. And without actually this set of allies on one side and the Pacific set of allies on the other side, like, where is your closest point where you're going to refuel if you want to get to the Middle East?
But I think they're so unstrategic. I think the thing that guides this particular cabal of people around Trump and himself, it is about what they hate, and they currently hate kind of the culture that they think is Europe.
Well, they kind of hate everything.
They kind of hate everything, but also it's driven by enrichment. And I do think they don't think that there's that much enrichment for them in Europe. And that's why they're so focused on other parts of the world.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I think that's probably true. I mean, we keep coming back to the trinket quality. Yeah. King Charles is about to visit the States. In the past, he has been useful as a sort of diplomatic soothing ointment of sorts. Let's have a listen to him during Trump's official visit to the UK last year.
Throughout my life, from the very first visit to the United States in 1970, and over 20 visits since that time, I have cherished the close ties between the British and American peoples. In fact, had the media succeeded in the 1970s in their own attempt at deepening the special relationship, I myself might have been married off within the Nixon family.
Ayesha, you sound as if you think he shouldn't be visiting the US right now. Do you think because of Trump's current sort of aggression and seemingly confused state of mind, there are big risks to the visit?
Oh, I think there are so many huge risks to this visit. Take away the rights and wrongs. Let's imagine we are the director of communications for
Buckingham
Downing
Palace.
Street
Yeah.
and Buckingham Palace, right?
Yeah.
And you're trying to organise this is just fraught. If you're the White House press secretary, you're going to be like, yeah, we're going to have everyone into the Oval Office. If you're the Downing Street press secretary and the Buckingham Palace press secretary, you're thinking, absolutely no way do you want King Charles sat there
In a political environment.
in a complete zoo of, MAGA journalists.
God, that's making me
I know.
anxious just as you're talking about
My skin
it.
is crawling. Can you imagine Trump going into like a diatribe about the Prime Minister, about the country, about our
Sadiq
troops,
Khan.
about
He'll
Sadiq Khan?
go for that.
And I really feel for the king in that situation, because what on
He'll
earth
probably
does
bring
he
up
do?
Harry and Meghan.
Oh, of
No
course.
filter. Like, he'll
Of
just
course.
be...
Oh,
He might even
God.
do a surprise.
My
Nathan.
sons, they're so great, but yours,
I feel for
only
you.
one of them.
I feel
Only
for
one of
you.
them's okay.
We all have a black sheep in the family. You can imagine. So let's say they don't do that, and they but also, in order to kind of negotiate.
But weirdly, Trump is quite well behaved around the royal family.
No, he walked in front of the Queen.
Correct.
Like, I mean, that's probably misogyny more than anything, but
And also rudeness. What I mean is it's
he
not...
might also shit himself.
Yeah.
Oh God! Well, but I think you cannot take anything You cannot take anything off the table. I mean, so that's the first thing. The second thing is, I do think the Jeffrey Epstein victims, the situation is really, really difficult. They have said that they have not got time in their diary. I think that's wrong. Look, I think it'd be very difficult I think the Queen could meet, given that she does a lot of work with domestic violence victims and she's a big champion for women. She could have a private meeting with, let's say, Virginia Giuffre's family. I don't know, not in a public way, but I think that would be. But
has she met Mohammed Al-Fayed victims, though? Because that's a big issue.
True.
That here we're not dealing with our own women that have suffered at the hands of...
Absolutely, that's a very good point.
A terrible man.
But I think the bigger point is, this country is about to go through, as we have just discussed, an absolutely kind of devastating economic crisis as a result of all of this. And I think King Charles is very aware of his privilege. And I think he's one of the most aware monarchs we've had in terms of he understands different community.
Yeah, exactly. He had time to get used
long
to it,
apprenticeship.
Yeah.
I think he does understand how much the country will be hurting. I think he'll feel really nervous about the struggles that people are about to go through and him sort of sitting there with Trump. I think he will be really anxious about this.
Let's get to the rights and wrongs of it, because it is wrong to make this man feel like more of a king. That is what he wants. He sees himself as the king of America, the king of the free world, the king of the world, maybe. And I thought it of the state visit here, and I think it doubly so of our monarch going there. All of this is reinforcing that worldview he has of himself, that he should be treated like a king. People should bend the knee for him. And that in itself might just be acceptable if we thought genuinely we'd extract something promising from it, but we never do. And if we do, it's short-lived before actually he goes and gives somebody else something even better who didn't do all of that pomp and ceremony for him.
Absolutely.
Now, look, the counterfactual can always be true, how much harm he would do us if we don't, and we don't know how badly he would behave if this got cancelled or whatever. But surely there's a golden ladder to walk down. You know, this is a monarch in remission from cancer. He's not that young. They could come up with some sort of, we're so sorry, he's got a terrible cold, doesn't want to pass it on to you. We'll rearrange it soon.
All of that is true. The risks are huge, I think. Like the possibility of something going wrong in Trump's current state is just massive. He's also influenceable, even if it's in short-term terms. Short-term terms can make a big difference. His most positive period towards Ukraine and the war going on there was just after his visit, and we know that Charles is really hot on the subject of Ukraine. So if he's one of the handful of people that maybe, you know, some of his words penetrate that thick skull, with everything going on, with the stakes being so high, there is also a rationale that says, put your A-team on the pitch. Maybe.
So I think there is some merit in that. There are definitely some merit in that argument, because you're right. We don't know what the counterfactual will be, but it could be awful, right? Because that's who we're dealing with. But if that is the calculation, and you may well be right, I think make a strong choice about it. I think if you're going to send the king to do that, don't do all smoke and mirrors dances. Do it big.
Yeah.
You know, make the king do something which is not protocol. Make a keynote speech. And he says, or they are in the White, you know, which is again very high risk. They are in the Oval Office, and you have the king say on camera with everyone there, I'm coming to you as, you know, the King of the United Kingdom.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But whether they'll have the balls to do that.
He is also the King of Canada.
And I still don't think it's worth the risk on this occasion. So I'm still actually in your camp in terms of, if there is
I
any
hope
way
Mark Carney is giving him
this.
advice, because he is the King of Canada. Carney is better at managing the global stage choreography of a lot of this than frankly many of the European leaders are, include our own in that, and maybe.
Okay,
I mean, if we
let's look at the flip side, because it's a good opportunity. European leaders, Spain, they've gone the other way.
Yep.
Is it wise to escalate the standoff? Like, if you were living in Spain at the moment, Trump having threatened to just cancel all trade, and let's say you were the current government's political opponent, would you be making massive hay out of the fact that the Prime Minister of Spain seems to have overshot, as it were.
Look, on one level, it is a very bold and principled move by Sanchez, and I don't think we should be dismissive of that, in an era where the strongman version of history seems to be the only one that any of them respond to. Okay, at least let's have our kind of own left-wing version of that, thank you. And he has been consistent out of the European leaders in refusing to simply absorb American pressure without any kind of response. But on how wise it is, I think you can make the case in both ways, because the logic of closing airspace is sound. If the US is using European infrastructure to prosecute a military campaign that European governments have not sanctioned, then there is a legitimate argument that you withdraw that infrastructure. The problem is Trump's response, of course, and pushback is always disproportionate. It will always be escalation. And Spain has had a taste of that with the trade threat, which is obviously nonsense because they are a member of the single market, the EU. They don't trade. They don't have bilateral trade. Yeah. Anyway, it's done all through the EU. So the question,
the EU will be
right, exactly. So it drags the EU, every member state into it, whether they like it or not.
Quiet Riot. Fox News is now streaming live on Fox One. When it matters most, turn to the voices you trust. We go beyond the headlines, bringing you the stories you won't hear anywhere else. Live coverage, sharp analysis, real perspective. At home or on the go. Stay connected when it counts. Stream Fox News on Fox One. Download today. Quiet Riot.
The fate of Ukraine also hangs in the balance. And I think, in particular, people like Starmer will feel just an immense sense of responsibility. Tensions on the NATO border are escalating. I mean, because there's so much going on, it went almost unreported that last Sunday, jets were scrambled to the Finnish border because there was a sort of incursion into Finnish airspace. It turned out actually it was Ukrainian drones that had fallen, but one of them had a warhead on it.
Yeah.
And so it kind of emphasizes that we are one tiny mistake away from Armageddon. Do either of you think there is any chance the US would help European NATO countries if called upon to do so right now?
I mean,
can you see any reality in which Trump goes, yeah, go on then, we'll help out if Finland is...
I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And I feel kind of absolutely devastated saying this, but I think probably erring on the side of no, probably. Because remember that what's happening in the Middle East is taking up it's taking up a lot of equipment. Yeah. It's burning through money and it's burning through equipment. Quite a lot of equipment that should have gone to Ukraine is not going to Ukraine. It's been used against Iran and the Middle East. So I think there could be a situation where we send the bat signal out. We're like, guys, and they're like, you know what? You were not there for us. I'm not saying never. I'm just saying right now we've got other priorities, I think that sort of, there was a really interesting report out last week from peers and MPs, national security experts, making the point that Britain can no longer rely on America as its number one defense ally. And I think that's the new reality we're in.
So is there an opportunity there for Putin, actually?
Of course he
frightening one to think...
That cunt has been the main recipient of Brexit, the main recipient of the war in Iran. Every time anything happens in our political decision-making of the last 10 years has benefited Putin. I mean, Finland only joined NATO in 2023. Right? It's a brand new alliance frontier. And Russian forces are obviously within striking distance, and you have unmanned Ukrainian drones crossing into that airspace unannounced. They should not have been doing that. That is not the route those Ukrainian drones are ever meant to go, I would point out. And any one of those ingredients in a slightly different configuration could escalate extremely quickly. I mean, you mentioned how quickly the jets got scrambled, Alex, and all of this is happening at the precise moment when Trump is, musing publicly about walking away from NATO again. And I just don't think you could design more of a tinderbox right now than the one we've got. Instability in the Middle East, maximum uncertainty about European commitment to European security, and maximum tension on the Russian border with Europe. And so that keep calm and carry on tea towel might need a second edition.
And just to follow on from that, I mean...
Now would be a good time to panic. Coming soon
Everyone
on mugs and
panicking. Hit
T-shirts.
the panic button now. It's time to hit the panic button.
Doomed.
We're all doomed. But the other thing, it does put so sharp into focus. Look, you're talking about closer cooperation with the Europeans. I'm 100% for that. But we also do have to think about our own reliance as a country, particularly on defence. And the big elephant in the room, we're talking a lot about what money could be set aside for the cost of living crisis, rightly so, particularly towards the end of this year. Yep. But we also have to have, there's just this huge, difficult conundrum of what we're going to do about defence spending in terms of getting that moving quickly. Mm. And it's such a difficult, because we don't have lots of money swishing around at the moment. And I think that's another kind of huge unanswered question, because these threats are not academic, they're not theoretical, they're not 20 years down the track, they're kind of here now. And we have to, let's say things continue to go very badly with America, and let's say there's restrictions on the sharing of intelligence, we have our nuclear stuff all banned out there. So we are going to have to think quite seriously about how we as a country get ourselves tooled up on there's defence spending, but also there is a big, difficult psychological conversation to have with the country about this new world. About the world, about this new world we're in.
Now, Naomi, we like to give calls to action, but it's not exactly easy in that kind of massive international story. Do you have something?
I do. Best for Britain, the organisation that I run, for those who don't know, it's going to be launching something about UK-EU relations. And it is very, very important, and it is very, very exciting. We're going to be launching it in April. And if you want to be one of the first people to hear about it, then please, please, please get yourself signed up to bestforbritain.org/join. It does not cost you a penny, unless you want it to, in which case we would be extremely grateful for any proceeds you can chuck our way. But if you just want to be on our mailing list and to know about, I think, quite a debate-changing report that is coming out very, very soon, then head on over and sign up.
Quiet Riot. Quiet Riot.
Now, we come to our supporter Sarah's excellent question that we didn't have time to answer in our Ask Us Anything session on Sunday. Sarah noted that pollsters tend to focus on voter movement from party to party, but wondered whether more work might be needed to analyse the movement of the parties themselves in terms of their values and policies, rather than the other way round. So, Alex, you go first, and then I'll go after, as to how you would have answered this if we'd not been cut off.
I mean, I'm glad, actually, we got cut off, because this took a bit of research. There isn't very much around. Basically, the question here is the extent to which the oft-used response, I didn't leave the party left me, holds true. Tim Bale at Queen Mary's University did some work on this after the 2019 election, and I found the results really quite surprising in several respects. So he looked at party members rather than just voters, which I think speaks to an even higher level of commitment, right? The context for this was a sort of anecdotal anxiety by both Labour and Tories about entryism, you might remember at the time, to different extents and for different reasons. So there is a clear correlation between Labour's membership expanding while Corbyn led it. And this is a time when Labour can reasonably be said to be moving to the left in terms of values and policies. But Bale found that while some of those members had come from fringe parties on the left, more had come in roughly equal numbers from the Greens and the Liberal Democrats, which I find really confusing. And even more were first-time party members. So actually they'd come from a space that wasn't loyal to any particular party. Looking at the Tories, some of whom, especially in the One Nation caucus, were worried about entryism from Faragists, at the time the Brexit Party, that would cause the Tory party to move further to the right, he found that, yes, about a third of members who owned up to having been in a different party before had come from either UKIP or the Brexit Party. But almost as many had previously been a member of the Labour Party at some point. And another smaller but significant, almost equal group were members of more than one party, like simultaneously.
Which you're not technically allowed to do.
Bale expanded some of this research into a book that looked at the Tory party since 1945. And I'll tell you what, I'll put it in the bookshop and I would advise people to read it. It's a good read. And again, he found a really mixed picture. I mean, this is a gross reduction of the book's argument, but
Sorry,
Tim. Very, very broadly, I would say the second most influential factor seems to be the leader. Their popularity, their ideological, not necessarily position, but focus, and the extent their preoccupations basically tap into public sentiment. And also whether they win or lose, but even more whether they are in danger of losing. Like that is the point when parties change, when they're in peril of losing the next election, rather than from learning the lesson of the previous one they lost, which I found quite interesting. But then the most influential factor was events, like social shifts, geopolitical movements, stuff that's altogether outside the party's control. That's the thing that really changes parties. So
fascinating. Well, I'll look forward to reading that book, and we should get Tim on the show because it was his work we were referencing last week. When we were talking about who members
we need to do an episode with Tim. He's the authority on this.
I'd just add that as someone who left their former party because I felt it had moved very far away from me, and in my case that was the Lib Dems, I love this question. When we look at standard voter flow analysis, which at Best for Britain we do quite a lot, and they're called Sankey diagrams, and you can see like movement from Labour to Reform or from Tories to Reform.
Can you feel the sexual tension?
Yeah,
the moment you started.
And so the Sankey diagrams kind of treat parties as fixed points and voters as moving parts. But I think Sarah's absolutely right. It is only half the picture, and arguably the less interesting half, because parties are not static. You know, we talk about the Blair years being more centrist and the Corbyn years, which we talk about being as quite hard left or whatever. Their positions and priorities and values do drift significantly over time. So when a voter switches, the honest question is, did the voter move or did the party move away from them? Do voters' core values actually shift that much? And the evidence that I've been able to find suggests that they do shift, but much more slowly than party positions do. So you might become more right-wing or left-wing over time, but that might be that you voted for Labour in 1997 when you were at university, and come 2010 you're voting for Cameron because you're, worried about tax or whatever. That means a lot of what we call electoral volatility is actually representation failure. Parties failing to hold their ideological ground or deliberately repositioning, triangulating, whatever it is, to try and win an election, that does leave some voters scrambling for alternatives. And of course, we also then have people who vote tactically. They might still be ideologically committed to a party, but that party can't win where they live, so they vote differently. So it's a complicated picture, but a brilliant question, and potentially even one for a standalone future topic.
Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's just so fascinating listening to both of you. I mean, I think there's just a lot to unpack there. I think as time has gone on, I think voters, I mean, this is just my anecdotal experience, I feel like voters are far less bound in to parties in the way they used to be. Like where I grew up in the west of Scotland in Lanarkshire, you always voted Labour because your mum and dad did, your grandparents did, it was part of the trade union movement. It's just part of the community. It was like the church and the football. It was just literally. And that has really, really shifted. And I think now, particularly because of, in a way, people are a bit more politically engaged through social media for good or for ill, I think people are much more transactional about their politics now. I think when somebody, in terms of a leader, and I think your point is a really important one, I think you can go, somebody can give you the ick very quickly as a leader, and then someone can turn your head very quickly, particularly if they've got really good social media game as well. So I think you've got a lot of people kind of doing pick and mix with their politics. Like I have friends of mine who were like diehard Labour, and they were like diehard Labour, and then actually they've gone Lib Dem, they're now, they went back to Labour, they're now headed towards the Greens. There's so much kind of churn going on at the moment. I think social media has had a big impact on that as well, because I think how it used to be is you would sort of, your political, it was like a tribe. It was like supporting a football club. In a way, you almost didn't have a choice about who you supported. It was like, this is what your family did, and this is
Through
what
the
your
relegation zone to promotion.
Exactly. But now it is, people are demanding and people are quite trans. And maybe in some ways that is...
And maybe that's healthy.
Maybe that is good. And to your point about tactical voting, there is now no safe seat. And in a way, maybe that is a good thing.
Yeah. Well, thanks both. And so, Sarah, the answer is, I think, yes, a party moving can leave some voters behind closer to another party, or homeless, as they say. But the problem with that analysis is that you always need to keep one thing fixed to track the other variable, and neither point is fixed.
It's a control. Yeah.
Basically, they're both a swirling mess, aren't they?
Yeah.
And the example you gave is a perfect encapsulation of that, because, in 97, yes, a lot of voters move, but also parties moved. And in 2010 with Cameron, again, a lot of voters moved, but the Conservative Party moved, hugely in a particular direction as well. So you have both happening at the same time. But definitely an area worth a lot more study than it currently gets, I think. And don't forget, listeners, if you too would like us to answer your questions live at our next Ask Us Anything session, be sure to get yourself signed up to ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod. And worry not, the wokey dokey that was planned for today will instead make it into this week's Sunday School.
Quiet Riot.
That was the end of part 1 of the Eureka Hazarika Quiet Riot special. Tune in tomorrow for part 2.
Quiet Riot is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Reese.
Quiet Riot.
My mother decided when I went to primary school, because we was poor, that she was going to shorten one of my older sister's uniform to make it into the jacket that goes on top, because underneath you just wear grey shorts if it's summer, or grey trousers. And she did that. The only problem was that the uniform had a big belt in the middle, which said Luana on the buckle, on a big, quite obviously girly buckle that said Luana. And so everyone called me Luana for 7 years while I was in primary school. She wrecked me. My mother ruined me with her penny pinching.
I think Luana's quite cool. That could be your alter ego.
Yeah. Not if you're like an 80-year-old boy.
Yeah, true. That could be your drag name.
Yeah. Especially, when I showed up end of September with shorts on, it really looked like I was wearing a little 70s mini dress with a big belt buckle. Anyway.
I love it.
Right, shall we get cracking?
Yep.